Welcome back to another CaCo Talks, everyone. We are really excited to share the narration that we will be doing for tonight's episode. So we are reading one of Courtney's short stories called 10 Little Fingers, 10 Little Toes. It's actually a really, really, really good read, which I don't think Courtney has it published anywhere outside of where she published it for Wake Forest. But hopefully we can get her to publish it soon because it's really, really, really cute. Kind of creepy, to be quite frank. But it's good. So we hope that you guys enjoy tonight's episode. Continue to celebrate Halloween and the fall season with us, and join us in all of our fall Halloween content that will be coming out and that has came out. So make sure you go back and watch those too. But make sure to stay tuned and listen to Courtney's short story, 10 Little Fingers, 10 Little Toes. So welcome back to another CaCo's Talks. We are happy to be joining you guys again for our Halloween series. Little, what do you call it, Courtney? No, I guess it's not a series.
A series, I mean, I call it celebration of October for fall time, Halloween, harvest.
There we go. Okay, so it's our little celebration for Halloween, for fall time, celebrating, all the good stuff. So today we have something special for you guys. We are going to be reading one of Courtney's short stories. And so a little backstory into how we picked this for the episode. So Courtney had wrote this short story like way long ago. And it's actually pretty creepy, which I don't really get creeped out often, for one. For two, I really like true crime. So it kind of gives me that vibe. But it's a really good short story. And so we were like looking for quality short stories to read, and like maybe like horror stories and blah blah. Couldn't really find any that were like decent enough to it wasn't really like decent, or it was just like okay, like that's boring,
or it was really famous already, something that was already really well known.
Exactly. And it's easily accessible, so there's really no point of us reading. So I was like, Courtney, what about that short story you wrote like a while ago? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, the creepy one. And she was like, oh yeah. So Courtney, tell us a little bit about how we got into this short story we'll be reading, and if you could please like introduce the name and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm glad Catelyn actually remembered the short story, because I had kind of put it out of my head almost. Like, I really liked it when I wrote it years ago, because I wrote it actually at the tail end of college for me. So that was like 3, almost getting on into 4 years ago. So, but I remember liking it at the time and being like, and sharing it with people. I even submitted it actually to our university's literary magazine, and I got in. So it was shared with even people like at the university as well. So but yeah, really how it came about is I was taking a short story workshop. And so we had to write 3 pieces of short fiction in order to just pass the class. And we would write a story and then workshop it with a group, get feedback from everybody, and, help improve our stories, become better writers. And so this was actually the second story I wrote in that workshop. The first one was actually kind of creepy too, but it was more offbeat, I would say. This one is the story, 10 Little Fingers, 10 Little Toes, that's the name of the stories, is it's got a little bit more of a sinister, kind of unsettling feeling, is what I would call it, more than anything. And really what made me write this is I was thinking about childhood, and I was thinking about kind of like the unknown, or like people in our communities who we see as like the other, the outsider, I guess, and how there's always a shroud of mystery surrounding them. It's not just, so-and-so's not like us. It was like, I remember growing up in certain places. I remember the adults telling us, and like when we would go to like visit our grandmother's house, our like grandmother's side of the family, of them telling us, don't go to so-and-so's house, don't go around so-and-so's house because of whatever. Or they didn't really say why. They were just like, don't go around so-and-so's house, in the neighborhood. And we'd be like, oh, okay. But then, of course, for a little kid, you're like, well, why?
Yeah, and then you're like, let me go venture over there.
Yeah, and so then you like creep around, you look, and you're like, and you just, as a kid, you're coming up with all these reasons as to like why. And it's usually in your head, you come up with this idea of like, well, this person has to be some kind of like witch, or this person has to be, you know, some sort of like otherworldly creature, right? Because you don't know why until you get older and you're like, well, that's probably why so-and-so was, quote, the outsider, you know?
Yeah.
And so I wrote this story from that little child's perspective. There's this element of like wonder and kind of investigation tied to this narrative that I think I wanted to capture that in like a little girl, but also include it in this like Southern community, you know? So yeah, I
For
mean,
sure.
it's definitely creepy and and purposely so, but that's because to a little kid, that's how this experience would be, you know?
Yeah.
And then I tied it to some personal, I mean, I don't want to give away what happens at the end because we're going to read it for you, but there's some personal, just some family history stuff that I was thinking about too, you know, because a lot of my artwork is centered around women and women's experiences. And I was thinking about like how a woman's experience, which will be explained at the end, or something that's happened in a woman's life, could manifest into this kind of dark, it's like dark behavior, I guess you could say. You know? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope that kind of gives you a little foray into 10 Little Fingers, 10 Little Toes. Yeah. Anything else you mentioned or anything you noted about it that you wanted to share?
No. I think once we get into it and read it, it's one of those you just kind of have to like sit back and listen to, and you're like, dang, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. It's perfect for October. I don't know why this didn't cross my mind when I was looking for, you know, stuff. And we were looking for original stuff too. And it's like, what's more original than something I wrote? You know what I mean?
Seriously. Yeah. Seriously.
So I'm glad I have the opportunity to share it here. You know, where else would I share it, you know? So
seriously. Very true.
But yeah, you want to go ahead and get on into the reading?
Yeah, so Courtney's going to start us out by reading a section of it, and then I'll follow with reading the other section. So yeah, we hope you enjoy this short stories. Once again, it is called 10 Little Fingers, 10 Little Toes. It's not out and published or anything like that, right?
No, the only place it was published was in the Wakes University literary magazine. So if you do actually own any copies of that, then yes, it was published there, but it's not published in any like other literary magazines. Although maybe I should submit it. I'm thinking about submitting it at some point.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe look out for it someday. It might be for the masses at some point. So yeah.
Or I could self-publish with some other short
stories. So this is an
stuff.
Exclusive now, you know.
Yeah, original content. Okay, very original. But yeah, all right. Well, let's get into it. 10 Little Fingers, 10 Little Toes by Courtney Geiger. She came like Easter Sunday. Showed up, everyone made a big fuss, then she left again, not to return until the next Easter, which was about the only time anyone had actually laid eyes on her, in church, on Easter Sunday, even though the whole first pew was dedicated to her, and her niece Jackie was head deaconess. They figured, despite the rumors, even she knew God and wanted to talk to him every once in a while. And no one could argue with that. That'd be like arguing with God. So they let it alone. This Easter Sunday, a familiar concoction, heat, humidity, and whispers pressed down hard on the faithful members of Calvary Baptist AME. So hard, it threatened to suffocate. Anyone bold enough to open their mouths and speak in it would just as soon be stopped by a mass of muggy air, sitting firm against their lips, like it had been waiting. And once it had located an open mouth, an orifice, the mass, the assailant, slipped past the lips into the mouth, then it wriggled down to the top of the throat, where it sat still, like quicksand, preventing easy speech. The ceiling fan blades high up in the rafters attempted to provide some kind of relief. In constant, big, full rotations, the blades fought to cut through the sticky wetness. But after a few minutes, when cutting the heat and humidity proved futile, the fans gave up and instead carried whispers from one pew to another, to another, to another, to another. Until pretty soon, it looked like the gossip, heat, humidity had taken a hold of nearly everybody, making it so it was a special strain just to breathe, let alone speak. But that didn't stop anyone from whispering as soon as Miss Mazzy stepped through the church double doors. Humidity or not, The big portrait of brown-skinned Jesus, hanging directly over the pulpit where everybody could see, looked like even he had something to say. With Miss Massey's first step down the center aisle, the stifled murmur grew to an audible buzz. Sister Johnson, y'all see Miss Massey? Sister Brown, where'd she get that hat? She never leave that house. Deaconess Williams, Annette, Deacon Jenkins' sister, say she thought she seen her last week at Rose's. Sister Leola, she ain't left that house in years. Annette ain't seen her at no Rose's last week. Deaconess Chandler, they say she's selling it out that house Hank left her. Sister Brown, it? Deaconess Chandler, it. Jackson, Cheryl's ex-husband, and Sonny, Ella's ex, go round there from time to time. That must be the only way she can keep up with the bills in that big house. You know she don't work. Sister Johnson, Sister Brown, Deaconess Williams, Sister Leola, bless her heart. Miss Massey was wearing all black like always. She sat in the front pew, her pew, like always. No one else sat on that pew, like always. And Miss Massey never spoke a word for the entire service, not even a quiet amen, like always. Everyone knew why she came. They just couldn't understand why she still did. It had been over 30 years since her last baby died. Wasn't she done mourning? Who could mourn for 30 plus years? Besides, no one had ever heard her speak a word about the deaths. On 3 separate occasions, 3 infant-sized caskets had just showed up to be buried. And now she only came to church on Easter Sunday, dressed like she was going to a funeral. No one knew how they died. They just had. And that they'd showed up to be buried, and that's when she all but quit coming to church. It was unnatural, unsettling, unbaptist. And that was besides what people said about the men. Over the years, people saw or thought they saw or heard or thought they heard or heard somebody else say that she had been with several of the town's men, and that she didn't care whether they were married men or not. Usually people claimed they saw or thought they saw or heard or thought they heard or heard somebody else say that the men came to her house in the late evening pretending to be delivering something and didn't leave until the next morning. And everyone knew what that meant. Of course, no one could say for sure she was or she wasn't, but they could whisper about it. They were certain of one thing, though. Miss Massey had had a husband who died some years ago. He died before most of the current deacon and usher board took their positions. He had been the previous town undertaker. That was, of course, until he was taken under. The story how was murky. Only the elders of the congregation could halfway remember. An accident out hunting with some men from across town. Then he showed up with a single slug-shot bullet lodged right in the corner of his skull. Elder Williams said he remembered hearing, after he was shot, he'd stumbled all the way back across town to his own front porch with the slug shot stuck in his head. He knocked on his own front door, and right when Miss Massey opened it, he fell to the ground and died. She'd been holding their 3rd baby in her arms. That's what he remembered anyway. The church ladies were always nice, though. They made sure to be, smiling and waving, "Hey, Miss Massey," when they walked by her in the church parking lot, all the while careful to grab their kids or their husbands or another lady's husband close. They didn't care how old she was. They'd swear in front of God before they let any of their children, let alone their husbands, or even men they were just messing around with, go anywhere near her. Where did she get those dead babies? And what was she doing with those men? To them, Miss Massey was like poison sumac. She looked like any other shrub in the woods, but you touch it, and before you know it, you got a rash, and big, swollen, yellow pus bubbles the size of a rock, praying to God your eyes don't swell shut. So they kept their distance and whispered from afar. But Spanky's, no one knew her real name, nor would have called her by it if they had. Mama never paid attention to any of that, so she always let her play down by the creek at the edge of her backyard, right up to the back of Miss Massey's house. Today, Spanky was going to do it. She was done always getting all the way up to the tire swing on her side of the creek, getting scared, then hauling tail for home. And she was tired of being called chicken for it, too. She wasn't chicken, and she was going to cross the creek into the witch lady's yard. Today, even if it killed her. It didn't help any that her cousin Twinkie, no one knew his real name either, kept pushing her to do it. All day, even at church that morning, he kept bothering her about it. Every time she'd look over the center aisle, he'd be right there at the edge of the pew mouthing, "You ain't gonna do it." Then, "You're chicken." Then, CHICKEN. And finally, making a chicken beak with his hand, he mouthed, "Bork, bork." Spanky was fixing her lips to mouth back that she wasn't chicken, and that she would do it, and that it was actually him who was chicken when she felt fingers on her lower thigh. Mama twisted her skin just enough to make the sting run all the way down her leg. Mama's fingers told Spanky she knew better than to mouth anything back to Twinkie in church. So she turned and faced the pulpit, trying to focus on whatever Pastor Bowens was preaching about this Sunday, the resurrection or whatever everybody kept saying. Spanky only knew how to use 2 cuss words, so instead of asking God for safekeeping during the benediction like everybody else, she mouthed them both in a silent prayer against Twinkie, to tell Jesus and God how serious she was. Dear Jesus and God, thank you for Mama and Daddy and for being born and for giving us food. But I pray you make my cousin Twinkie stop calling me chicken and making chicken noises at me. I am not a chicken. Hell, he won't even cross the creek himself, damn it. Hell, and I'm going to do it today anyways, damn it. Jesus and God, please keep me safe. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. That afternoon, after everybody had waved goodbye to Miss Mazzie in the parking lot, and after everybody had eaten Easter dinner and taken off their Easter clothes, Spanky and Twinkie sat on the back porch, eating 2 healthy slices of carrot cake. Twinkie started. I heard my mama say she's selling it at her house. You know what it is, don't you? Yeah. No, you don't. It's roots and potions. She do voodoo magic. She make potions and mixes plants and stuff. That's why she's a witch. And she gives it to the men who come to her house at night. And she eats kids. No, she don't. Why else she got 3 baby Casses in the church graveyard right now? She ate all the meat off them. And it's their bones buried in the ground right now. Well, I ain't a chicken, and I ain't scared of no witch lady. Yeah, you are, 'cause you're a chicken, that's why. No, I'm not, and I'm gonna go to her house. No, you're not. Watch. You're gonna get to the tire swing like you always do and turn right around. Watch. No, I'm not. I'm gonna jump the creek and go to the witch lady's house. Watch. I bet you won't. I bet you I will. They took off. Spanky ran as fast as her legs could go. Past the boulder, past the big gumball tree, past the rope swing, past the moss tree, past the tire swing, past the fence, leapt over the creek, and...
When she touched ground again, she looked at her feet and smiled. She wasn't chicken after all. She turned around to brag to Twinkie, but when she looked up, Twinkie was gone. He turned back and ran home. She giggled aloud, so he was the chicken, not her. She'd be sure to let him know. She let out a big breath and wiped the back of her hand across her forehead. Now she needed to see about the witch lady. She made it this far, she wasn't going to go home without the real pride, knowing something Twinkie would never know and was too scared to find out. Doing something Twinkie, and probably the rest of the kids on the street, would never do. But when she thought about the task before her, nervous butterflies began to swell up inside. Until now, Spanky hadn't thought she might actually step foot inside the witch lady's house. It had never occurred to her that she actually could. It had always looked so big and so far away from everything else. She had always, like Twinkie and the rest of the kids, made sure to steer clear of it when they were all playing outside. But now that she jumped the creek and she was standing on the witch lady's land, the weight of it all sunk into Spanky's shoulders, and the butterflies welled up again in her tummy. But she couldn't turn back now, or else she was a chicken, and Twinkie was right.
But Twinkie was wrong. She was not a chicken. So she mumbled a quick prayer to Jesus and God and tiptoed careful towards the witch lady's house. The house loomed large above Spanky, and for the first time she noticed how lopsided it was. From the clearing in the woods, where she usually looked at it, it looked like a nice, big, straight house. But now, up close, it leaned. It leaned bad. The vinyl siding had yellowed from years of missing pressure washes, and more than half the windows on the back only had one working shutter. Where there was grass, it had browned and only congregated in little mini tufts of 3 or 4 sporadically throughout the backyard. The roof had streaks of black gunk caked atop its shingles, and the gutters were so packed full of leaves and other natural debris, a colony of birds had lined up their nest on top as if to claim the house as theirs. And at the very tip-top of the roof, dead center, perched a sizable brown buzzard. Seeing Spanky inch towards the house, the bird didn't fly away as Spanky expected. Instead, the buzzard sat firm and perfectly still, waiting. Amazingly, someone had left the back door open, so Spanky's small body slipped inside easy. As soon as she had, though, she realized why the door had been propped open in the first place. A pungent, chemical smell, something like stale water, overwhelmed her as soon as she crossed the screen door. Spanky did all she could to keep from coughing aloud. That would be a dead giveaway. She wouldn't risk that now. So she hid herself against a big cardboard box nearby. It had frigid fluid printed on its side in big black letters. Spanky had never seen either of those words before, Neither had been on her teacher's spelling test, so she sounded them out as best she could. Fry, fluid. Frigid fluid, she determined. What is that? Spanky thought. Must be for frying food, since it had fry in it. After this discovery, about 1,000,001 questions shot through Spanky's head. Why did the witch lady need all this frying stuff? She must fry a lot of stuff. Did she use it to fry kids before she ate them? What about the 3 cassets, like Twinkie said? Were those babies fried too, before she put them in their cassets? Was it one of her potions? From her voodoo magic? What about... The doorbell rang. Spanky froze. A few moments later, Spanky heard a pair of feet shuffle across creaky linoleum. Then a door opened a ways off. Listening close, she heard the faint reverberation of a man's voice. It said, "Here you go, Miss Mazzy." Something exchanged hands. "I'm sorry, I meant to get down here yesterday, but I got tied up at church." No response from what Spanky could hear. Then finally, "I'll let you go then," he said. "Happy Easter." Then the door shut. Spanky heard a box being ripped open, then a hand rummaging through its contents. Once it found what it was looking for, the 2 feet shuffled back across the linoleum, and the butterflies fluttered up again. But this time, instead of staying in Spanky's tummy, they went all the way up to the bottom of Spanky's throat. She stood in place until all was quiet again. Cheeks puffed full of air, she clamped her thumb and forefinger over her nostrils and shuffled down a hallway, which proved difficult because both walls were lined with even more cardboard boxes bearing the same word, frigid fluid. When Spanky reached the end of the hallway, a woman's voice, the witch's, made her stop. The voice drifted out of the room just ahead. It sang, 10 little fingers, 10 little toes, 2 little ears, and 1 little nose. The butterflies leapt from the bottom of Spanky's throat in one single swarm. She was sure if she opened her mouth, they would all fly out. So, with her other hand, she pressed the inside of her palm to her lips to keep all the butterflies inside. Spanky noticed a sign hanging on the door first. It had the word, nursery. That word had been on a spelling test, painted on it in big pink letters. Just as the back door had been, this one was also left open. It was open just wide enough, allowing Spanky to see inside. It was a small room, only slightly bigger than Spanky's own. Baby toys and knickknacks littered the floor and shelves. Inside, Spanky could see what looked like 2 cribs lined up against one wall, and a third jutted up against another wall. Only, these cribs didn't look like normal baby cribs, ones like Spanky had seen before. The bottom of the cribs were normal, they had bed frames and gates, but in place of the baby mattresses sat what looked like infant-sized glass fish tanks. But what was inside the fish tanks was even more confusing. It looked like babies. One in the first crib, another in the second, only the babies were totally stiff. In fact, the babies weren't moving at all. In fact, the babies looked dead. As far as Spanky could see, the babies were dead. Spanky's mouth dropped wide open, so wide she was scared one of her butterflies might jump up her throat and fly out of her mouth. Her mind went a mile a minute. So Twinkie was wrong, she thought. And Twinkie's mama was wrong, and probably everybody is wrong, and the baby caskets didn't have babies' bones in them at all, like Twinkie said. Because the witch lady had the babies with the bones right there. And the witch lady didn't eat kids either, because she kept them. And then maybe the witch lady isn't a witch lady. She's just a lady with dead babies. The lady continued singing. 2 little eyes that shine so bright, and 1 little mouth to kiss mama goodnight. Then she crossed the room, moving nearer to where Spanky was hiding. And for a moment, all the butterflies felt like they might wriggle right out of her. And she had to press her hand over her mouth extra hard to keep them all from spilling out. The lady was holding another baby in her arms, and another, just like the 2 in the glass crib. She placed the baby down in the crib closest to the door where Spanky could see everything. She sang, 10 little fingers, 10 little toes, 2 little ears, and 1 little nose. As if she were going to change its diaper, she placed the baby on its back, face up, so it looked up at her. Only, from what Spanky could see, some of its face was withering away. The left side of the baby's face, where a layer of skin should have been, was now covered with several gaping holes. Inside the holes, the remaining strings of muscle and facial tissue used their last bit of stretch to cling to the rotting skull underneath. Where big, bright eyes should have been, were instead eyeballs covered in brown, jaundice-colored gaze. The little body, every limb, all the fingers and toes, looked to be rock solid. The lady, who as Spanky was now noticing didn't look quite as witchy as she had thought, seemed not to care though. Instead, she just smiled at the baby and continued to sing as if it could hear every word coming from her lips.
And Spanky looked on. Her butterflies kept right on wriggling around inside, almost scratching now to get out. 2 little eyes that shined so bright, and 1 little mouth to kiss Mom goodnight. Next, the lady pulled out a bottle of the frigid fluid, and like baby oil, she poured the bottle's content all over the body. Using only her first 2 fingers, she took care to rub in the liquid in slow, gentle strokes. When she finished, she placed a cap, made of the same glass material, on top of the tank. She flipped a switch under the crib, and soon enough, a tiny air purifier turned on. She began again. 10 little fingers, 10 little toes, 2 little ears, and 1 little nose. And Spanky looked on. Crossing to the 3rd crib with great care, like any mother, she removed the child from its glass tank. Careful not to wrap the blankets too tight, she swaddled the infant and sat down in an old rocking chair facing the nursery's only window. 2 little eyes that shine so bright, and 1 little mouth to kiss Mom goodnight. Holding her baby close, she rocked silently back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until Spanky heard a soft whimper. Her whimper turned into tears, her tears into sobs, and her sobs into weeps. Then Spanky's butterflies stopped wriggling. And before Spanky recognized it, several warm, tart tears were running down her own cheeks and were melting into the corners of her mouth. Back and forth she rocked and sang and wept. 10 little fingers, 10 little toes, 2 little ears and 1 little nose, 2 little eyes that shine so bright, and 1 little mouth to kiss Mama goodnight. And back and forth she rocked and sang and wept. Rocked and sang and wept. And rocked and sang and rocked and sang and rocked and sang and wept.
So that was 10 little fingers, 10 little toes. Thank you so much for listening to my short story. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it, gave you a little bit of the creeps while you're listening. And the more important that you gained something from it. You got the themes, the motifs, the characterization, because as a writer, you always want that to stick out foremost in people's mind after they read your work. And also more importantly, that it really sticks with people. So, but yeah, now we're going to get into a little bit of discussion about the story, how we felt, some of the things we noticed, some of the things we think are really interesting and want to highlight. Yeah. Anything you noticed, Catelyn, that you think that really stood out to you when you listened to it or you reread it, or even some of the thoughts you had the first time you heard about it?
I think there's a couple things that stood out to me. So one thing that really always stands out to me about this particular short story is the writing of it. It really takes you back to that childlike language, really, which enhances the state of mind that a child would be in. So reading it out loud especially was a little difficult because in an adult brain, you just don't necessarily talk like that anymore. So it's always super interesting reading this story because it definitely just takes you completely back to that state of mind of just being super curious how you talked, improper, and just thinking like a child. So being super curious of what you should not be curious of because someone told you not to be. So it's very fun, childlike. But it also turns very serious very quickly. So
yeah. I think the thing that makes it feel most childlike in the language is the kind of false logic they have, but they're so sure of it. You know how little kids are even though their understanding of the world is kind of limited because they haven't experienced everything, they're so sure of what they do not know. You know what I mean? And so the times when Twinkie, her cousin, is she's doing voodoo magic, she obviously is a witch. Clearly this is what this must be, which is, so that's how children think, I remember even when we were little kids, just us arguing about things that must have looked absurd to adults because it's we're totally missing the picture. We're totally missing the adult logic to it, but we're so sure of it at the same time. Yeah. So that was something I definitely wanted to put in the story. And I think that's what makes it feel so childlike, you know?
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And I think also too, one of the major things that I noted too was like how these dead bodies were described without saying too much about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the word voice was very descriptive, but like simply put, so you clearly got it, like the holes with the eyes, the where the eyes would have been, the skin like falling off, you know. So another thing I really enjoy about this particular short story, is the language or the verbiage, I guess you could say, wording, if you will, that's used to describe the dead babies. And so it is very, without using very many words, and from a child's, perspective of what they perceive a dead body to be and the details of how they can describe it. It's really interesting to see her take on this dead body, even that she can comprehend the idea of what a baby should look like, but she knows, something's just really not right here. So that's interesting too. Does it say how old she is in the short film?
No, but when I wrote it, I was thinking she was like 7 or 8, maybe 9.
Okay, so she's a little older than I expected. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, she knows what death is and death isn't.
Yeah.
But I think, obviously, most people never see a dead person in their lives, let alone a little kid seeing a body that has, like, rotted, it's jarring,
Yeah. You can tell it's very, like, foreign to her. Mm-hmm. And, like, she, like, relates it to just, like, what she's learned in school, what she's talked about, experience. But she's like, I know this is not right. Mm-hmm. That, like, instinct feeling, I guess, a child gets. But also she's very intrigued. So.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, actually, and this was a critique I got, is like the fact that she stays,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And isn't, like, immediately just, like, turning around and running. I think it's interesting. And I think I don't know, I was just trying to think, like, as a little kid, I think I would have stayed. I would have been very curious. I think I would have stayed. I don't know if I would have ran.
I would have ran.
I think,
because I would have been like, I'm next.
Well, that's true. That very much could have happened. But I think when she sees the care that the lady is taking to care for her children, I think that's what makes her stay. Like, she's put off by the dead bodies, yes, but the lady's energy is not giving her something to be afraid of. It's like sad,
that's
you
true.
know?
Yeah, and I think also too that kind of plays into the idea that a lot of kids read into, like, vibes or auras, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. They really like some babies will like you and they don't even know you, right? But then there's some babies that are like, oh no, do not touch me, because it's like just a bad vibe and aura. Mm-hmm. But she's an older kid, and the same thing happens here. She, like you said, she gets this feeling of, this is a safe place, even though something's really, really wrong.
Yeah.
So
it's like, it's sad. And I guess when I was writing this, I think the overwhelming feeling for her is like sadness, and she's not able to fully pin what that sadness might be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like empathy. Like, she's very empathetic.
But yeah, I think kids, like what we were saying, Spanky picks up on the sadness, the vibe of this lady, and that's really what I think keeps her there, instead of just bolting when she sees that something really off is happening here,
Yeah, I think also curiosity too. Like, she is very, she seems like a very curious child to begin with, which I think, depends on each child. Because like I said, I would have ran. Courtney probably definitely would have stayed. And so I think while she felt bad for this individual, her curiosity also gets the best of her. She's very curious, and not only curiosity, but she's very determined to follow this through, because she's not about to go back to Spanky and tell Spanky that she ran. Twinkie. You know what I mean? Like, Twinkie, excuse me. Yeah, her name is Spanky. Spanky's not about to go back to Twinkie and be like, I failed. You know what I mean? Because Twinkie, she got to show this off to Twinkie. She got to show this off. So.
Exactly. Yeah, so something else that is really interesting that I did intentionally put in the story is Spanky is the only person in the town who really knows what's happening in the witch lady's life, or like really knows what's really going on. So Spanky is the only truth figure. Everybody else whispers or thinks this or maybe that. Spanky knows the truth, which is interesting that it's coming in such a small, tiny, grown body. It's the child who knows. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So,
It was,
I know this is not in the story, but like, how do you know, like, have an idea of how Spanky would have known?
Would have known? What do you mean?
That the lady has these bodies.
Well, when she goes to the house, Spanky's the only one who's bold enough to, on a dare, go to the lady's house, and she sees for herself.
Oh, now that she knows.
Now that she knows, that's what I mean. Spanky knows. Okay. At the beginning of the story, the tension is because the town just does not know really what's happening. But Spanky takes it upon herself, her little body, her little self, to go and honestly find out in some ways.
Yeah.
It's on a dare from her cousin, but it's like she finds out something more. She's really more knowledgeable than any of the ladies in the church. She's more knowledgeable than her own mother per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she sees the raw emotion behind it too. She does. It's not just it's not just the facts of the case. She sees what's really her pain, her hurt, the lady's hurt. You know?
Yeah.
So, and
nobody knows about the details of what's going on in this lady's. All they know is that her kids are dead and that she has these visitors. But even the concept of why those visitors are there and, she's apparently being promiscuous with these individuals, that's not even factual. So.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I wanted it to be a child, someone, when gossip goes around, people try to shield children from gossip, right? Like children don't know gossip, blah, blah, blah. But it is in fact the very person you're trying to shield from the gossip is the only person who actually knows the truth in the story, which is the baby. It's like out of the mouth of babes. It's sort of like that,
Yeah.
Because it's
like, would you ever create maybe another part and or like put more details in what happens when she goes back to town or like when she leaves? Or
I don't think so, just because I think where you leave it right now, that's the strongest, underscore to me is that Spanky knows, and Spanky has changed as a result of this. Spanky is a different child, Spanky knows something about the world now that she may or may not ever share with anybody. And really, that's not what the story is about, what Spanky does afterwards. It's about the fact that Spanky gets it.
Yeah.
It's about her, that moment of revelation for her. Is what it's about. I think also,
too, a good story always leaves you with something to constantly be thinking about. So,
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You want the work to work for itself and not you work for the work, not for the audience, essentially.
Exactly. And I think nice little bows sometimes do leave you with, when that conclusion is solid and it's like what people want to feel from the story, I think sometimes that can make you miss what the point is. And like I was saying, the point isn't, it's sort of, we know Spanky has changed, and that's what's important, is the change itself, not what she does with the change. Because
for sure,
she's going to go back into a society or a world where they do gossip, where they are the type to look at someone sideways because of what they may or may not be doing. You know what I mean?
I just want to know if she tells Frankie.
Twinkie?
Oh, excuse me. Why do I keep calling him that? Twinkie.
Yeah.
Probably because we know somebody that act like Twinkie.
Right. Yeah, the names I was very specific about the names. Spanky and Twinkie. Yeah. They're just like kind of like backwoods country nicknames. You know?
For sure.
But yeah, I don't actually think she tells Twinkie. I think she tells Twinkie she made it to the house because she's going to gloat and she's going to be like, I made it to the house. But I don't think she tells Twinkie what's going on.
I think she's going to be afraid to tell him too, honestly.
Yeah.
I think she's like, she doesn't know. It's kind of like it's like a double-edged sword. If she says something, then everybody's going to know because Twinkie's probably going to talk, for one. But also, too, then it's kind of like everyone's going to have questions for her. How'd you get in the house? Why'd you go in the house? What did you see? Da, 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 da. And it's just going to become a hot, big ball of gossip and drama. And she probably understands that she will be in that, on top of the possible trauma that she may now experience. So.
Exactly. Yeah. I think she says, I made it to the house, and that's it. I think she leaves it right there, and she lets what happened beyond the house be what happened beyond the house, you know?
Yeah, kind of like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah.
Got it.
And, you know, it is. I mean,
what if this is all a dream?
Moment.
Oh, I guess you're the writer, so you would know, but.
I mean, I never thought about it being a dream, but I guess it could be.
Yeah, could be.
It could be a dream. I know. I think it's very real. I think the creepiness is in the reality of it. You know.
Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah,
and the thing is, like, this is especially with very like in backwoods families and whatnot. I don't think this idea is as obscure or like to think. So, you know.
No, I mean, we definitely all had that like one house down the street where we're like, don't go over there. You know what I mean? Like, don't go in so-and-so's yard.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Like when you're playing, they're like, don't go over to so-and-so's house. Or don't. And they really won't tell you why. They just be like, don't. And they have this like look of like confusion on their face. And you're like, well, you know, what's really going on over there? And so that's what really prompted me to start writing it, because I was like, I remember that feeling, because I think there was somebody's house we were told, or somebody's yard we were told not to go into as little kids when we were playing. And and then, which of course makes you like, why? You know? And as a little kid, you're not thinking danger. You're thinking just it's curiosity, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for reading that and also writing it. Just a really good read. So.
Yeah. Hopefully I can get it published somewhere, or I might even put it with some of the other short stories that I've written, actually. And then people might be able to get it so they can read it and reread it, or read it to other people, or whatever, you know.
I think it's a good idea. I think you definitely should put it out there.
Yeah.
It's a good little short read, so.
Yeah, and it's not too long either.
Yeah. Well, so we hope you guys enjoyed Courtney's short story called 10 Little Fingers, 10 Little Toes. We hope that you guys will continue to watch and listen to our holiday content. We definitely have some special stuff coming up for everyone in our following episodes, where we are celebrating the rest of fall and October and Halloween. So make sure you stay tuned for those 2 episodes, or however many episodes, I'm not really sure. But thanks for listening, guys. I really enjoyed this, so hope you guys did too.
Yes, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the story. I hope you enjoyed. And make sure you stay tuned in to our holiday content, because we got goodies coming for you. All right, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.